This critique analyzes the complex and aggressive communication tactics of a controversial public figure.
Right. It focuses on their use of convoluted data, theological attacks, and these manufactured victimhood narratives.
Exact. And thank you for submitting this. It's a really sharp piece of observation.
The catalog of tactics is remarkable, for sure. Documenting that level of evasion it's a lot of work.
It is. But as soon as we look at how this really serious analysis is delivered, we hit our first major challenge.
Yeah, a structural one.
Right. So the intellectual gravity of the whole substantive critique it's significantly undermined by this jarring and pretty extensive product endorsement.
It breaks the analysis completely mid-flow.
You've done all this work to establish a serious, detailed discussion. Operation Mocking Pastor, theological errors, this idea of preemptive intimidation.
It's high-stakes stuff. It really demands your full attention as a listener.
And that's where the weakness comes in. The pivot is so abrupt.
1 minute we're in the weeds of, spiritual and political confrontation.
And the next, the script just dives into this long, testimonial-driven ad for a fasting diet.
It's a fundamental shift. Not just in subject, but in tone.
The whiplash is immense. You've set the stage for this critical analysis, and then suddenly you're hearing about personal eating habits, sugar, weight loss. It just kills the listener's focus right before you get to the next really relevant part about the Israeli Knesset member's comment.
The momentum is completely lost, and that's a big deal. Because the integrity of the analysis depends on that sustained, serious focus.
So the suggestion here has to be about protecting that focus.
Yeah, you have to either resequence the segments or just fundamentally reframe that commercial read.
Got to separate the sponsor obligations from the core narrative flow. It's a matter of hierarchy.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, option 1 is the cleanest. Just move it.
Put the sponsorship right at the top, like an intro note before you even start?
Or at the absolute end. If you label it clearly, the listener knows what's coming. The core narrative stays unbroken.
Okay, but what if it has to be a mid-roll spot?
Then you have to condense it ruthlessly.
Get rid of the personal stuff.
Exactly. The listener doesn't need all the details about holiday sugar crashes or autoimmune issues or losing 2 pounds.
Because those anecdotes just clash so violently with the main topic.
You can't talk about smear campaigns and theological vandalism and then pivot to that. It doesn't work.
So if it has to stay in the middle, you treat it like a concise, almost formal sponsorship message.
Right. Drop the personal stories, keep the emotional level low, get to the facts of the product, and get out.
And then use a really clear transition back. A signal that says, okay, that's over, we're now returning to the main event.
Yeah, something like, now resuming our analysis of strategic denial.
The bottom line is structural editing.
Your content is this serious, the structure has to protect it. You can't let a health testimonial undermine an investigation into political manipulation.
That makes perfect sense. And, building on that point about analytical integrity, that brings us to the language.
The word choices.
Yeah, because the substance is solid, but the delivery might be creating some unintentional barriers.
Okay, so this is our second point. While the material makes a powerful moral case, the frequent use of highly charged personal insults, it risks limiting the appeal and the perceived objectivity of the analysis.
The weakness is that maximalist language. The critique calls the subject a demon, moral sewage, even just a general idiot.
Which is, look, it's intensely emotional. And for listeners who are already on your side, that feels good. It's validating.
It preaches to the choir very effectively.
Right. But what about a neutral listener or someone who's skeptical?
To them, it can just sound like a character assassination. It distracts from the actual analysis of the tactics.
And it gives the subject's defenders an easy way out. They can just dismiss the whole thing as, personal hatred or bias.
So that's the real challenge, isn't it? How do you keep the passion and the moral outrage, which is clearly driving this great work, without sacrificing the analytical objectivity that makes it credible to more people?
Exactly.
So the suggestion is to keep that passion, but to refocus the critical vocabulary.
Okay.
Center the language on the functional failure of the rhetoric, on the strategic manipulation that's happening. That elevates it above just a personal attack.
So you shift from judging the person's morality to describing the mechanics of their deception. Yes, the moral outrage is implied when you show how the machine works. You don't have to state it so direct.
Let's use an example. Calling someone moral sewage is a final judgment.
But describing their method as, say, The strategic deployment of implication designed to neutralize theological correction. That's an analytical observation.
And that's much harder for their defenders to argue with.
Right. It forces everyone to confront the actual strategy being used.
Okay, so let's apply that to the part about the manufactured victim narrative. The script currently ends with, "You're not special, Candace."
Which is visceral, sure, but it's a personal challenge.
So instead of that...
We should replace it by focusing on the strategic contradiction.
the hypocrisy. Yes.
Highlight. The material already pointed out beautifully. She demands total deniability when she's attacking others, using vague implication.
And like with Charlie Kirk's circle...
Exact. But then, when she's criticized, even with legitimate policy criticism,
From the Knesset member?
she claims absolute victimhood and turns it into a death threat.
By focusing on that switch, you expose the game.
The focus becomes the contradiction, which is way more devastating than just saying she's not special.
And the same thing with the spreadsheet. Instead of just calling it disgusting,
Lean into the analytical language you're already using.
talk about laundering one grotesque suggestion, or the tactic of guilt by proximity stacked timelines.
Yes. When you use technical vocabulary like that, laundering, proximity, stacked timeline, you're treating the smear campaign like a sophisticated financial crime.
Which is what it is.
And that maintains the investigative, analytical tone that is the material's biggest strength.
And the critique shifts from, we disagree with this person, to, we understand how this dangerous system of communication works.
Which moves it from opinion to, almost rhetorical science.
The credibility just goes way up.
And it becomes a tool for the audience, a primer on how to spot these techniques in the future. The whole thing becomes more potent, more durable.
That kind of structural clarity, it sets us up perfectly for our third point.
Which is maybe the biggest opportunity.
I think so. It's about connecting all these disparate tactics into one single theory.
Okay, so the strongest analytical opportunity here is to explicitly synthesize the subject's different smear tactics, the veiled implication, and the manufactured victimhood, into a single unified strategy.
A strategy for evading accountability.
Exact. Right now, the material details these two tactics very effectively, but they feel a little distinct.
You have the implied accusation with the spreadsheet.
Right. Designed for deniability.
And then you have the preemptive intimidation, which is Operation Mocking Pastor, and the Knesset reaction.
The weakness is just that the connection between them, it's a little too light. They feel like two separate items in a case file.
Instead of two functions of the same machine.
Right.
Because as I see it, both tactics serve the exact same purpose.
Which is?
To avoid ever having to defend a concrete, verifiable statement, something that can be fact-checked or challenged. It's a survival mechanism.
That's the core idea. So the suggestion for improvement is to frame the whole analysis around that. The subject's core principle is an active refusal to state or accept facts.
Her commentary isn't commentary. It's a system of strategic denial.
The strategy of absolute deniability.
It's powerful. And all the pieces are already there in the material. We just need to build the bridge for the listener.
So you explicitly link the observation that she refuses to explicitly draw so she can claim deniability.
From the Charlie Kirk section.
With the observation that when you can't withstand correction from Scripture, you try to discredit the shepherds instead.
From the Mocking Pastor section.
It's a direct line.
Yes. The moment a verifiable fact threatens the narrative, whether it's political or theological, the defense mechanism kicks in. And the defense is never to engage. It's always to deflect and countersmear.
I think that makes the analysis formidable. But let me just push back a little on something.
Please.
You called the Knesset incident the apex of denial, which it is, politically. But isn't the theological attack, Operation Mocking Pastor, actually more damaging to her core audience?
That's a great point, a critical nuance.
It just feels harder for a religious audience to come back from accusations of spiritual malpractice than it is from just, political hypocrisy.
I think you're right. The Mocking Pastor operation shows the foundational mechanism, attacking the very source of correction.
It attacks the belief system itself.
Whereas the Knesset incident shows the maximal deployment of that same mechanism in the political sphere, translating a policy disagreement into a threat from murderers.
So one is foundational to faith, the other is existential to public discourse.
Exactly. But the Knesset incident is the perfect finale for this strategy of absolute deniability.
How so?
Well, think about the original criticism. A Knesset member said her commentary was poison being sold to the American people as patriotism. That is legitimate, policy-based criticism.
From an official.
Right. And her response is a masterclass in the strategy. She translates that specific political criticism into murderers are threatening me.
It's the ultimate act of rhetorical denial.
She completely sidesteps the substance by deploying the highest possible level of victimhood. There's no need to ever address the original point.
And it turns a debate about rhetoric into a claim of literal persecution.
So if you argue back, you sound heartless.
Right. By synthesizing all these points, the piece moves from just a report of bad behavior to an explanatory model of how this stuff actually operates.
And that's the real so what for the listener, isn't it? If we frame it as the strategy of absolute deniability, how does that change things for them going forward?
It inoculates. Once you see the pattern implication for deniability, attacks on critic, victimhood to escape accountability, you can predict the next move.
The piece becomes a tool, a defense manual.
And that's the real value. You're giving the listener a framework to organize all this incredible research.
It's not just standalone scandals anymore.
No, it's predictable textbook applications of a single method. That gives the critique a really powerful original angle.
The material is already so well researched. This isn't about fixing flaws.
No, it's about maximizing the impact of the analysis you've already done.
It's just optimizing for clarity and for reach.
Okay, so let's quickly summarize the actionable items for the listener.
Let's do it.
First, strengthen the structure and flow. That means dealing with that jarring commercial break. Either move it or shrink it down to protect the momentum.
Second, calibrate the tone and style. Keep the passion, but shift the vocabulary away from personal insults and toward the functional failure and strategic contradiction of the rhetoric. That'll broaden the appeal.
And finally, the big one, angle and originality. Synthesize all the different tactics, the spreadsheet, the victimhood, into that single, unified concept, the strategy of absolute deniability.
Right, that provides the framework for the whole piece.
These steps will really elevate what is already a very strong analysis.
Absolutely. We really encourage you to implement these suggestions, and please submit the revised material back to us for another round when you're ready.